Hi, everyone. I'm Rena Nine, and thank you for joining us. President Trump will be the third president in U.S. history to face a Senate trial after being impeached by the House of Representatives last night. House Democrats approved 2 charges last night along party lines. 230 lawmakers voted for the first article, abuse of power. 229 lawmakers were in favor of the second, obstruction of Congress. No Republican approved either article. One Democrat, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, voted present on both counts. Well, now the process heads to the Senate, but the details of the trial still unclear. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has publicly opposed Senate Democrats' calls for additional witnesses from the Trump administration. He says the proceedings will begin in January, but the timing of the trial now up in the air. Last night, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi suggested that she would temporarily withhold the articles until Senate Republicans come up with a plan for a fair trial. She defended the decision with our Nancy Cortez at a press conference today.
Do you run the risk, as some Republicans have said, of looking like you're playing games with impeachment if you hold on to these articles for too long?
I said what I was going to say, Nancy. When we bring the bill, which is, just so you know, there's a bill made in order by the Rules Committee that we can call up at any time in order to send it over to the Senate and to have the provisions in there to pay for the impeachment. And then the next step, whatever you want to call it, the trial. That is where you put the managers. I was not prepared to put the managers in that bill yet because we don't know the arena that we are in. Frankly, I don't care what the Republicans say.
Well, Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman and an ally of the president, Lindsey Graham, criticized Pelosi's plan, calling it constitutional extortion.
I don't know who came up with the idea, let's hold the articles back until Mitch McConnell does things that we like in terms of the trial. Let's hold the articles back maybe forever. That's constitutional extortion. That just cannot stand. I'm urging Speaker Pelosi and her leadership team, please don't go down this path. You can criticize what we do in the Senate. You can hold us politically accountable, but don't get us off in a ditch constitutionally that may hurt the country for a long time to come.
Well, during Pelosi's press conference, the president weighed in. He accused the speaker of being afraid to present the articles of impeachment to the Senate. I want to bring in Paula Reid, Nicholas Wu, and Keir Dougall. Paula is a CBS News White House correspondent. Nicholas is a politics reporter for USA Today, and Keir is a CBSN legal contributor and, as well, a former assistant U.S. attorney for New York's Eastern District. So, Nicholas, I want to start with you. What exactly does Speaker Pelosi want to see in the Senate trial?
So what Democrats really object to is what they see as the lack of a fair trial in the Senate. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has already said that he isn't going to be an impartial juror and wants President Donald Trump to be acquitted as soon as possible. So what Democrats want to be able to do is to be able to call more witnesses and bring more documents out during a Senate trial.
So, Paula, is the White House welcoming this move by Democrats to try and delay this trial?
Well, they're using this delay as an opportunity to attack the House Speaker and undermine the legitimacy of the impeachment proceedings. And the president tweeted suggesting the House Speaker was afraid to pass along the articles, and the White House has released some talking points saying that she is perhaps depriving the Senate from the opportunity to conduct a fair trial. So this delay, no one truly expects. The folks who are actually working on preparing for a Senate trial, they do not expect that these articles will be withheld forever. That doesn't really mesh with the Democrat strategy so far, which has been to move swiftly on this. Of course, there is an election around the corner, but this delay has given the White House and the president's allies an opening, and they are seizing on it to try to undermine the Speaker and her impeachment efforts.
So, Keir, you've got a right to a fair and speedy trial, right? Does Nancy Pelosi have real leverage here?
Right. So you're referring to the criminal procedure under the Due Process Clause. Every defendant does have the right to a reasonably speedy trial. And so the leverage here is over this notion of whether or not the process will be fair in the Senate and what it is. It makes some sense to me that if she does not know what the process is going to look like in any shape or form, that she would need that information to identify House managers. And of course, the longer this drags out, now that President Trump is suffering, has been branded as impeached now, the longer that continues, that is something that he would be uncomfortable with. So the delay, if you call it that, or the reasonable time to figure out who she should identify as reasonable managers, if you're a Democrat, that comes now at the cost of President Trump's brand.
So, Nicholas, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell criticized Pelosi's handling of the impeachment process this morning. I want to play for you what he had to say on the Senate floor today.
Speaker Pelosi's House just gave in to a temptation that every other House in our history has managed to resist. They impeach a president whom they do not even allege has committed an actual crime known to our laws. They've impeached simply because they disagree with a presidential act and question the motive behind it.
So, Nicholas, do you see what would McConnell's next move be if Pelosi does continue to withhold these articles?
So just this afternoon, McConnell was supposed to meet with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and they're supposed to start negotiating around what a Senate trial might involve. It's unlikely that he'll give Speaker Pelosi the witnesses that House Democrats want, but we might see some of the other outlines that might move the process forward a little bit more in the coming weeks.
Paul, I'm curious what the president has to say about all this. He appeared to shrug it off at a rally in Michigan last night as this was all unfolding. I want to play for you what he had to say.
It doesn't really feel like we're being impeached. The country is doing better than ever before. We did nothing wrong. And we have tremendous support in the Republican Party like we've never had before. Nobody's ever had this kind of support.
Paul, he seems to be embracing impeachment.
Almost. I think what he's trying to say there is that this impeachment is happening despite his economic record. And he also emphasized how this has really unified the Republican Party. And I've spoken with sources from the White House who are working with folks on the Hill, and they tell me, in fact, they are pleased with the Republican support they are seeing, particularly ahead of a likely Senate trial. And, Rena, that's something the president has been calling for since the beginning of this process. He has wanted his party to rally around him and defend him, and that has happened. But the idea that the president is happy about this or embracing impeachment, I think they are trying to use it, weaponize it to help propel him in 2020. But the fact is the president's legacy will forever be tainted with impeachment. One of the first few lines of his obituary will likely mention this. And the president has publicly said this has taken a toll on his entire family. So for him, no matter how they try to spin it, impeachment is personal, and he is not happy about it.
Have you heard from his team? Have they started preparing for a Senate trial?
They have. The meetings between White House officials and GOP leaders, they continue. They're still waiting for the president to select the group of people who will represent him at a likely Senate trial. We do expect the White House counsel, who has been leading his defense so far, will be one member of the team, but I'm told the president will likely want a group of people to defend him. But we're trying to learn more about exactly who he's considering. But the challenge is really trying to reconcile the president's desire for a show and lots of witnesses with the GOP leaders' perspective, which is less is more when it comes to the president's defense. And they're still trying to reconcile that. And the hope is that once this process gets underway, that the president will view it as fair, believe he has been heard, that he has had his day in court, and that he may see the wisdom of not calling so many witnesses. That is the hope by some of the officials here at the White House. And certainly GOP leaders have been not so subtle about their wish for a shorter trial.
Keir, when you talk about the Senate trial, is it possible that new evidence could be presented in the Senate trial? And do you see the likelihood of witnesses coming forward?
So it is very frequent that after indictment and before trial, more evidence is found. Prosecutors find more evidence, seek more evidence, and very often that happens. I just want to react to what we saw Mitch McConnell say a moment ago about there being no crimes. We've said before that you do not need to have a crime for an impeachable offense. I think it's worth reading Alexander Hamilton's words in Federalist number 65 that impeachable offenses, quote, are those offenses which proceed from the misconduct of public men, or in other words, from the abuse or violation of some public trust. They are of a nature which may with peculiar propriety be denominated political, as they relate chiefly to injuries done immediately to the society itself, unquote. So we know that you do not need to have a crime for an impeachable offense, and indeed one of the articles considered against Richard Nixon was for abuse of power without a specific crime alleged. On to the witnesses.
Is it better for Republicans to call witnesses at this point? What do you think?
Well, so the question would become, would President Trump continue to assert privileges to withhold those witnesses? In that case, then the Senate trial could potentially be delayed now, with President Trump impeached, being branded as impeached, waiting for that evidence to come through if it was litigated up through the courts for the next months or potentially even year or two, before the trial could resolve the question of whether or not President Trump should be removed from office and disqualified from holding further office.
Wow. You know, Nicholas, I'm just curious, do Senate Democrats have any sway and ability to influence McConnell and how this trial is set up in the Senate?
So in a Senate trial, it only takes 51 votes to pass a motion to call a witness or otherwise change the procedures of a trial. The thing is, there's 47 Democrats and 53 Republicans. So the Democrats are very much in the minority here, but if they can get 4 Senate Republicans to agree with them on a motion to call a witness, say Ambassador John Bolton, then they could change the trial in their favor.
Paula, before we go, I want to ask you about that rally. I want to go back to that rally last night. The president attacked Michigan Congresswoman Debbie Dingell for her vote to impeach him, considering the treatment that he gave her after her husband, the late Congressman John Dingell, when he died earlier this year. I want to play for you that exchange from last night, followed by what Debbie Dingell's comments were this morning on CNN.
She calls me up. It's the nicest thing that's ever happened. Thank you so much. John would be so thrilled. He's looking down, he'd be so thrilled. Thank you so much, sir. I said, that's okay, don't worry about it. Maybe he's looking up, I don't know.
You know, I think it's time to put politics aside on these kind of shots. I try to be respectful of everybody. I've never taken a personal shot at this president. I think his family is off limits. I don't want to politicize my husband. I don't want to politicize his death. It is still something that I'm really grieving over. This Thanksgiving was really hard, and Christmas is harder, and I'm going to go back to doing my job and doing a good job for the people of my district.
Anyone who's ever lost a loved one knows how hard it is, particularly around the holidays. Paula, why did the president launch this attack? What are Republicans and those around him saying? I know he's not one to issue an apology, but is this a case where one really does need to be issued?
It's possible. Clearly here he took this very personally. As I said earlier, this is a personal thing for him, impeachment, and he was upset that she voted to impeach him despite the fact that he had given what he described as A+ treatment for his husband's funeral, her husband's funeral. He just cannot seem to reconcile her gratitude in a time of mourning with her vote for impeachment. And what was significant, Rena, is the way the crowd reacted. Covered a lot of rallies. There are parts of this country where people really get into his trash talking. And if he trashes the media, they're with him. If he trashes Hillary Clinton, they're with him. Even if they potentially suggested that a dead man had not gone to heaven, that they would be with him. But not in the Midwest, Rena. Traditionally, when he attacks even the press, really anyone, the Midwest crowds, they're not as down with that. They're not as enthusiastic. And that's what you saw last night. The crowd seemed a little confused about how to respond to this. There were some cheers, but quickly the president sort of pivoted and suggested, okay, well, we'll just assume that he's looking down, because the president reads the room. He knows he might have gone too far, but you know, I wouldn't hold your breath for an apology. His spokeswoman, Stephanie Grisham, was asked about this morning on CBS This Morning. She did not have really any defense to offer for her boss.
Yeah, but you know, Michigan is not an insignificant state coming up this November. I want to thank you, Paula Reid, Nicholas Wu, and Keir Dougall for joining us.
Thank you.